Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. And of course, we've just had the release of the trailer for Delirium, which is 3.10 League, which is coming out on the 13th of March. So I'm just going to watch this with you and then discuss all of the information that's hidden on the Path of Exile official release page. So without further ado, let's put this on. I love this voiceover. So it seems like you walk into this disco ball mirror type thing, and then once you've done that, the rest of the map, there's something about the rest of the map that makes it more difficult and also causes there to be some increase in rewards. This will affect other past content, which is something I really like, the way that it seems like it integrates with content like breaches. But anyways, let's watch the rest of it. Very much get a sense that this is a clear speed league. There was someone that used one of Veritania's attacks. Don't think it was Veritania in the map though. Alright, these are a really complex new mechanic, we'll get to them later. Here's a bunch of different cluster jewels. Again, these are something to discuss later. The one with nothing looks really interesting, and there's also just a huge amount of customization here. It's going to create a situation where players are going to have a very complex passive trees and very different to each other, but it also seems from what I've seen so far that they're doing this in a pretty careful way. There's none of this randomness that's associated with things like the timeless jewels. This is something where you know what you're getting. So there is randomness, sorry, but there's no secret information like there is with the timeless jewels. Everything is revealed for you, and you can actually assess whether something is an upgrade or not. So there's that Veritania wannabe again. I notice here that look like a twin Cowan, and this is a breach that has been affected by the Delirium as well. This is a Syndicate encounter that's taking place with an Abyss now, taking place, and an Elver incursion, all taking place under the Delirium. Now we'll have the developer commentary, which I'll pause a bit more often.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Touch the mirror of Delirium and your nightmares will manifest as reality.
So that's the disco ball. That's what that's going to be called.
Existing enemies gain terrifying abilities and new foes emerge from the mists.
Okay, so it's both adding new monsters and also modifying existing ones, which is worthwhile knowing. I think this means you're going to want to find the mirror early and tap it, but we'll have to see that in practice, how that plays out. And maybe it's the case that you want to clear the map first, then tap the mirror, but maybe you want to tap the mirror initially, and we'll just have to experiment and work that out as we go.
Plunge deeper into the Delirium to seek deadlier terrors and even greater rewards.
Okay, so it seems further away is more relevant.
Delirium affects all Path of Exile content to greatly increase its risk and return. Consume orbs of...
Okay, these are interesting. These Orbs of Delirium allow you, and you'll notice there's a number of different types of them. So they allow you to go and modify an existing map. So essentially, if you're wanting to focus on Legion-specific Orbs of Delirium, I think it'll be possible in the end game to trade aggressively for those, getting rid of the other sorts of orbs that you've got, and picking up as many Orbs of Legion Delirium as you can. Which you'll then be able to put on your maps and just run them back to back to back. In Solo Self-Found, that won't be an option. I'm sure that there'll be not enough Orbs of Delirium to be constantly running your favourite one, because otherwise you'll need to get lots of these in each individual map that you run. but I assume that you'll be doing quite a few of these modified maps.
Delirium to put entire maps into a state of delirium. Each orb increases the intensity and adds a new reward type. Combine splinters from these maps to reveal Delirium's mysterious endgame encounter.
Now, one thing to note there, and I almost didn't think this, we have Ambush and we have Abyss on the map device, and that's all that's being teased at this point. There's always little teasers like this. So the Simulacrum seems like it's the Cortex encounter of this league. We'll have to see how it works in practice. I don't generally like splinter mechanics. I find them really frustrating and annoying to pick up all of the little trash. However, in this case, I think it might be a little bit different because, well, it's only 100 of them. It's not Legion where you needed 500 for the top tier encounter and 300 for one to be worth doing.
Grow your passive skill tree by placing cluster jewels in its outermost sockets.
I think that really explains these by itself, which is something that's really interesting. You'll see here, if we just go back to that and watch that again, you'll see there that there's a number of specific nodes that have been added there. But when we go back to where we can see the cluster jewel being focused on. So, one added passive is Peak Vigor, one is Special Reserve, one is a Jewel Socket. Add 6 passive skills, small passives grant Flask Duration.
Passive skill tree by placing cluster jewels in its outermost.
So Flask Duration there, and there you've got your life with recovery from flasks, Flask Duration again. And then you can stick another one in there at this point.
Craft these jewels to improve their passives.
So, just missed the perfect timing for that. So this one again is another cluster that gives more information on what's coming up. And notice that this can only be put into a small, medium, or large outer jewel socket. So you can't use these on the inside ones. That'll be interesting because I think these are pretty much all 3-pointers. So they'll have to be fairly good. 2-point jewels are obviously a lot better than 3-point jewels, and we'll have to see how that goes. I also think that you need to go small to medium to large.
Add one of 280 new notables.
Now, 280 new notables is huge. There's a bunch of things showing up here.
Additional sockets and exclusive keystone.
Now, these are the things that will be quite irritating to find, I think. However, there's going to be an information overload. There's 280 new passives, which is going to feel like a considerably large amount of them. But I think we'll pretty quickly work out which ones are the best. And so I think that a cluster jewel that grants a very good new mechanic will be expensive in trade leagues and probably not available in solo self-found. Whereas one that grants a more undesirable one or a more niche one will probably be very, very cheap. Also, notice here, this is an interesting one. Gain 2 grasping vines each second while stationary. This grants a huge benefit for you for sacrificing move speed. I don't think anyone is going to use this on a normal mapping build, but it might find a niche use in some sort of build that's very much focused on enduring boss damage. 1% less damage taken per grasping vine. You can get up to 10 of them. That's a meaningful defensive layer, and 20% chance to deal double damage is significant as well. However, I just find that the grasping vine mechanic is so frustrating. There is no way I'd use this. Here's some combat footage. Here's what looks like it might be a new skill, or maybe just one that I'm unfamiliar with. Is that Frostblades with massive chaining, or is it something else? A little bit hard to tell. Anyways, so that's the developer commentary side of things. As I've mentioned in the video that I put out the other day, there's always some sort of information hidden in this section as well. There's a number of screenshots of just combat here in the Defeat the Nightmare. The first couple are all just a high-level overview of the league mechanics, and just a number of just shots there showing off various encounters that you can get into. And then this plunge into the horror section again is still more a high-level overview, but points out the way in which you can interact with other content in the game. Just having a quick look there. That's that looks like a really nasty situation to be in. It's not quite porcupines exploding is very similar. I feel sorry for that character there. And now here we've got this Terra Permeates Raycast. Again, still a high level overview, but pointing out that encounters you once mastered can now be played under the effects of the Delirium, substantially ramping up their difficulty and reward. And so here is an example of an Elva incursion being run. There is also some discussion later that there's a revamp of the Temple of Atzoatl as well. Now here's one of the Immortal Syndicate encounters, that fortification fight that is being buffed up by the Delirium. This is something that I hadn't noticed in the developer commentary video. This is going to be nasty. These Syndicate members don't mess around in high tier maps. And of course a Legion encounter that doesn't just have the Legions, but also has the Delirium content as well. So all these monsters will be empowered and considerably nastier. I get a real sense that there's going to be an absolute premium on clear speed in this league. Now we have the new orbs that have been added. Just a little bit of more information that comes up here that shows you how there's a whole lot of ways that you can modify an entire map so that everything in there is dropping a considerable number of fossils. And here's an example where there's an otherworldly fungal hollow map of miring, so just a basic blue map that's got currency rewards and fossil rewards in it, and also players in the area are 40% delirious. That is a stat that I don't really know the meaning of yet. Hopefully it'll be something that becomes clear quickly when we're actually playing with it, and I'm immediately going to hold Alt over the thing, and then I realize that's not going to work because this is not the game client. This is just some sort of mechanics overview. Here's just a little bit of info on the Simulacrum. This seems to be very much very little information is being released about this. I think they might be wanting us to go into it somewhat blind, but let's just assume that this is this league's equivalent of the 5-way domain of Timeless Conflict, or a top upgraded Chayula Breachstone, or a Cortex, or any of those, or an all encounter. Something that's probably going to be a very difficult fight. Anyways, we'll get to see that one in some time. It will probably be something that you'll need to be at the top, absolute top of your game to master. Now, here's a little bit more information on these cluster jewels. So, once more, if on the outer edges of your tree, you can socket a cluster jewel, and then that will add a cluster of new notables, which can then be have cluster jewels further socketed into them, allowing a new level of customization of the passive tree. I think in terms of customization of your character, this is probably up there with Synthesis in the amount of customization it adds, but it's communicated in a very different way. So just having a quick look here, we've got a few examples. This one here grants a fire resist, basically something similar to, I think there's a node that does pretty similar things to this, max fire resist and regen life per second. But this adds a cluster where most of it's actually pretty weak. Have a look here, you'll see that there's 3 passive skills. So I'm assuming it's these 3. These 2, all they do is give you 12% fire resist, and then the last one is the Molten One's Mark, the thing you care about, which is 2% max life, 2% max fire res and 1% of life regen per second. Now that's a small cluster jewel, so it can only go into a small socket. Now we have here a medium cluster jewel, which I assume can go in a medium. Actually, I assume small ones can go in small, medium, or large sockets, and medium can go in medium or large, and large can go only into a large socket. Note that this is a rare item. This is not a unique item, and in fact, this one's just a magic item. These are undoubtedly craftable with all the normal crafting currency, which is going to be really interesting. So, adds 5 passive skills. Added small passives grant minions have 12% life. Small passives also grant 4% chaos resist and 7 flat life. One added passive is a Blessed Rebirth, and one is a dual socket. And then Blessed Rebirth, of course, is a better version of the minion life nodes. I think that may be something we see a lot, where there's a running theme between the implicit effects. So in this case, I'm assuming that what looks like it has enchant text is an implicit, and some of the nodes that you get in there. Next up, we have this Broodruin large cluster jewel, which I assume can only go into a large jewel socket. I don't know how exactly that's going to work. We'll have to figure that one out. In fact, it does say down the bottom, yeah, medium or large, large only. This one has added small passives have 25% increased effect. That's interesting. So passives are granting 10% attack damage, so that's going to be up to 12%. One added passive is Devastator, one is Drive the Destruction, and one is a Jewel Socket. Devastator being attack damage, increased damage from ailments, and a chance for monsters you kill to explode, which is always nice, especially given it explodes for physical damage. And then Drive the Destruction, attack damage leached as life, maximum total recovery per second from life leech, and yeah, 20. Yeah, so basically lots of reasonably powerful nodes there, although nothing build defining on that jewel. Now we have the most build defining of all these jewels that I've seen, so I've got a feeling this might be an endgame rare item. So when you are not using gloves, because these can't be used in conjunction with Facebreaker or Doriani's Fist, I think it's called, for obvious reasons, and when you are not equipping a main or offhand item, so no shield, no weapon, then at that point you gain an absolutely staggering amount of flat physical damage to attacks. I'm sure there's going to be ways to exploit this. You also gain 60% more attack speed. So all of this is telling me that this is going to be an absolute build-defining jewel. I'm interested to see how we can make this work. I'm sure it can be done, and I'm sure that you can do a scary amount of physical damage using this. I also need to check the interactions with Eternity Shroud, and in fact I might just do that now. And here's the Eternity Shroud. It is my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, that if you have empty inventory slots, then the Eternity Shroud will still grant the hits ignore enemy monster chaos resist if all equipped items are shaper items. So this means if you are not equipping gloves, this means you're a bit restricted in how much you can convert damage without gloves, because gloves are the Harimsaro slot or various other alternatives. So you're not going to be able to convert as much. But if you're using a skill like Smite, then you can convert everything. And actually, don't quote me on Smite, because it might be a weapon attack only. It might not be functional with unarmed. In any case, I think there's a lot of potential for this to do some pretty explosive things with Eternity Shroud and multiple layers of conversion. But that's going to be something that I want to see all of the changes coming up in the league before going into serious speculation on. Lastly, we have this cluster Voices, which I think is this one here. Adds 3 dual socket passives and adds 1 small passive, which grants nothing. So that's a simple one that's going to allow you to get more and more use out of your passive tree. Now I'm assuming, and I could be wrong here, that the large dual sockets are the ones that directly connect, and medium and small are in some of the ones that are added by these new jewels, but we're going to have to figure that out when we actually get to see more of them in practice. Now, something that should be really interesting, and having a look here, this is looking fantastic. Endgame improvements. So, Conquerors of the Atlas content is being changed without being massively overhauled. It is now deterministic to spawn Conquerors. So no more are you going to have streaks where you don't get a Conqueror influence map for 20 maps in a row. You will instead know how long it is until you get your next Conqueror. The other thing that looks really interesting here is that, well, it looks like it's going to take more maps each watchstone that you get within an area, but also you will know before putting your map into the map device whether it's going to be influenced or not. So if your character is really powerful, then you can say, all right, Hunter influence, I can hack that, let's bring out the 8-mod map and get more Hunter influenced items. On the flip side, if you can't hack an 8-mod Hunter influence map, but you could do an 8-mod map normally, then you can just save a reasonably easy mod to use when you've got your influence up. So I'm assuming that these yellow ones are the ones that have a Conqueror taunt, and the orange ones are the ones that don't. Of course, this is always something that's subject to being proven wrong. Reintroduced sextant vendor recipes, that's just a minor thing but will be good. Created extra incentives to reach higher awakening levels. Given that I feel that the awakening level 8 is absolutely central to play at the moment, I'm not sure how I feel about this. It's already so powerful that you kind of have to do it. And that's just based upon getting the Shaper and Elder Guardian maps from it. Everything else is a small bonus. So if there's small bonuses like that, like the unique item, then that's going to be cool. If not, I feel it's just going to force you to down one path. Now, I don't really mind being forced down that one path because it's probably the most diverse gameplay that's available in the game at the moment. It's running a whole bunch of different maps, so we'll see how it goes in practice. We've revamped Vale side areas and maps. Good, they were a great idea, but they just did not have enough monsters in them to feel good. I've revamped the Temple of Atzoatl. So the Atzoatl improvements is something I'm interested to see. I hope that it's something that makes the area more dynamic and more fun, rather than just making it into a massive loot fountain. But we're just going to have to see what they've done there. New skills and support gems. Here we have Blade Blast. So this detonates blades that are left behind by Ethereal Knives, Blade Vortex, and Blade Fall for a potent combo. I really like the concept of a combo skill. I haven't liked the execution of most of them, but Ice Nova Frostbolt is an interesting playstyle. This could potentially be the new version of that combination skills. So hopefully this also signifies that the physical spells are getting a little bit of an overhaul. They're interesting, but they're just not powerful enough, except for Blade Vortex. They're just not quite powerful enough at the moment. They don't need massive numerical changes. If they get small ones, then they'll be quite good. Next up we have this Kinetic Bolt. Fires a projectile from your wand that bounces back and forth, forking with each bounce. Spell damage further empowers the wand attack. Okay, this is cool. This is the sort of thing that sounds like it's going to be somewhat build-defining and awesome and unique and different. I like it. At least in theory. Let's see the execution. And Stormbind. Oh, does this look familiar or what? So this looks a lot like the mana runes from Baran, and this is something that I think, just based on being a ground-targeted channel, it's going to be competing in the same sort of design space as Fireblast, which is not a skill I'm particularly excited about because it just doesn't feel good to play in the current speed meta. But let's see it. Who knows? Sometimes these skills can be really strong. There's also some new items that are added here. There's just the first teasers. There'll be more teasers coming over time. As I mentioned in a previous video, divination cards get underrated by a lot of players. They can have a big impact on how the game feels to play. There's a divination card for Dying Sun that I'm assuming is going to drop from the Twilight Temple, I think it's called, the unique Moon Temple map. Just judging by the fact that it's Solaris and, well, it's presumably about Solaris and Lunaris. Though the progeny of Lunaris specifically, maybe it's not tied to the Solaris-Lunaris fight or the Lunaris wing there. We'll just have to figure this one out. But anyways, a way to target farm Dying Sun would be interesting early in a league. Very early in a league, Dying Sun can be very, very, very expensive because it's a flask that only drops from the Shaper, and it does have a pretty low drop rate. Later in a league, especially with the current Shaper and Elder mechanics, basically these just get created as a waste product of people farming for the Fragment of Shape and the Fragment of Knowledge. I think that's the two that drop from the Shaper, in order to be able to run Uber Elder. But earlier in a league, the Shaper rewards can be very undersupplied in the market. The other thing that will be of note is that stack decks will drop these early on, so it will be possible to get Dying Suns earlier in a league than it normally is. Tinker's Table, 5 fossils. This is going to be a little bit of a fun one. This couldn't exist until they made fossils stackable. This is basically the Gambler Divination card, but ratcheted up a level. Fossils have a number of different rarity tiers. In my mind, there's 3. There's the ultra rare ones, the likes of Hollow Fossil, which only drop from special encounters. I expect that they will drop from this, but very seldom. There's the second tier, which are only behind Fractured Walls. Things like Sanctified Fossil at the good end, or Gilded Fossil at the medium end, or Encrusted at the weaker end. And then there are the ones that can drop from, that can either drop in clusters behind walls, or that can drop outside fractured walls. Things like Serrated Fossils at the good end, and Pristine at the medium, and Aberrant at the low end. However, the thing that's fun with fossils is that they are always something that you want multiples of the same one, and there's pretty much no total duds in the fossil pool. Even the cheapest ones definitely have their niches. So I think this is going to be a fun divination card to turn in. It's also going to be one of those ones that people will do large-scale gambles with, and will probably lose almost every time that they do a large-scale turn in. Here we have a Prismatic Jewel. Now, this is going to dilute the drop pool from the Azarin's Reward Divination card. It's also kind of cool. This jewel socket has 20% increased effect per allocated passive between it and your class's starting location. I don't know how this is going to work for a Scion, for a Scion Ascendant. Let's say that you start out as a Scion Ascendant and then you take the Path of the Marauder, and then this is over in the Marauder section. That's something we'll have to see, but in any case, flat dexterity and flat mana. Flat mana isn't particularly important given that you can't scale this that high, but I'm not sure how well the flat dexterity is going to stand up. I kind of want to see this in practice, but I don't expect it to be any good. Also don't know how this is going to drop, but as I say, the Azarin's Reward Divination card, the one that comes out of Relic Chambers, will undoubtedly drop this a lot, disappointing people that are chasing its other rewards. Kitava's Teachings, Small Cluster Jewel. This one's a really interesting one. Don't think this is powerful. Every second consume one nearby corpse to recover 5% of life and mana. That 9 is very strong, but 10% more damage taken if you haven't consumed a corpse recently is a really powerful drawback. Probably too much for this to be good. Last up we have Elgar Mortis, these Carnal Mitts, and Perfidy. So Perfidy first, you can have, this is a banner themed item, which is kind of cool. I feel banners are a bit too micromanagey at the moment, but who knows, they're certainly strong, and the ability to just have 2 of them passively on is good, but all the stuff about gaining stages is, I find it's just too much micromanagement. However, if you don't agree with that, if you like the micromanagement, then definitely give this plate a go. Note that it requires level 68. That tends to mean, on a unique item, that they're going to be pretty rare. It's not a guarantee, and some of the most rare and powerful unique items added in the last couple of years have been things like Inspired Learning, the jewel, that is obviously minimum level very low. I think you can equip a jewel at about level 3 or 4 if you're a Scion. So no guarantee that that I'm right on that front, but I do suspect that this might be quite rare. It also, if it's something that's chanceable, it's also going to interfere with anyone that is trying to chance a shaped Kalam's Heart, which is only a bit of a bling item. It's not something that's got much practical application because it's in the same inventory slot as Kalam's Heart, as Eternity Shroud, but it is something that will annoy a couple of people if it is chanceable. These also feel like they've got the same aesthetic. They might be part of the same set. Elgar Mortis is granting Energy Shield, Cold Lightning Resist, and then a number of ailment-related effects. Sap is something that is one of the silly new ailments that were added a couple of leagues ago that everyone forgets exists. And to be honest, I don't even remember what it does. I think Sap might be the one that causes monsters to deal less damage with attacks, or anyway, something like that. We'll have to figure that out when it comes out. But that said, I don't really think that this is an amazingly powerful item at the moment, but I'm very open to being wrong on that. And then there's just the information, the advertisement for the supporter packs, which I think look amazing here. And I'll have to have a look in more detail at the stuff there. Anyways, So the key takeaways from this, the thing I'm most excited for initially is the upgraded past content. So hard modes of past content that are empowered by the Delirium mechanics. Really want to see how these play out in practice, and I'm quietly excited by them. As well as that, the Orbs of Delirium allowing you to, I'm not quite going to say that it's create your own blighted map, but maybe it will feel a bit like that. We don't yet know how rare these are going to be. It may be that they're quite rare. It may be that they're quite that they're like blighted maps in that way, or it might be that they're more common. And if they're more common, they're probably less impactful. They'll be interesting. And then, of course, facing a new sort of boss encounter. I'm gonna err on the side of guessing that this is a boss, even though there's nothing about it that proves that it is. It could be an encounter with overwhelming amounts of trash mobs, but I got a feeling that this will be a boss encounter. Anyways, if you've got any comments or questions or your own initial reactions, fire away below. I'm gonna leave it there. I hope you have a good one.